All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to go back about 300 years to look at one of the craziest financial meltdowns in history. But, this isn't just a history lesson. This is a story about how a total financial frenzy managed to trap one of the greatest minds who ever lived. And, more importantly, how the political mess that followed created this pattern, a pattern of scandal and overreaction that you'll see is still with us today. And this is our genius, Sir Isaac Newton. I mean, think about it. This is the guy who gave us the laws of motion, who figured out gravity. He could literally map out the entire solar system. And yet even he had to admit he was totally clueless when it came to the madness of the market. This quote just nails the heart of our story, right? It's that classic battle between pure, cold logic and the wild, unpredictable mess of human emotion when big money is on the line. And this is what that madness cost him: 20,000 pounds. Now, to put that in perspective, in today's money, that's well over $3 million. And the wild part is, Newton was a smart investor. He actually got out early and made a ton of money. But then he saw his friends getting even richer. He got swept up in the mania, and he jumped back in right at the very top. And he lost a fortune. I mean, if it could happen to him, it could happen to absolutely anyone. So what was this bubble that not even a genius like Newton could resist? Well, to really get the bubble, you first have to understand the crisis that made it possible. See, back in the early 1700s, Britain was just drowning in debt. We're talking decades of expensive wars. The government was desperate. And that's when a private company, the South Sea Company, stepped up with what sounded like a brilliant, almost magical plan to save the day. The whole plan really boiled down to this one financial trick: the debt for equity swap. Now, it sounds super complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. The South Sea Company basically said to the government, hey, we'll take all those messy, high-interest IOUs you've got floating around, and in return, the people who owned that government debt would trade it in for brand new, shiny shares in the company. In theory, everybody wins. So here's the sales pitch, right? To the government, they said, we'll fix your debt problem. To the investors, they said, why hold on to those unreliable government bonds? Swap them for our stock. It's going to be worth a fortune. And how did they make the stock seem so valuable? Well, they sold a dream. They had an exclusive monopoly to trade with Spanish South America, which everyone just assumed was packed with gold and silver. They weren't just selling stock. They were selling a fantasy of infinite wealth. And for a little while, my God, it worked better than anyone could have imagined. I mean, just look at this timeline. The year is 1720, and the stock price didn't just climb, it went vertical. We're talking from 128 pounds in January to over 1,000 pounds by June. That's an 8-fold increase in just 6 months. But you know the saying, what goes up like a rocket must come down like a rock. By September, the dream was totally over. The stock crashed, and fortunes were just gone overnight. So you have to wonder, what was really fueling this? Was it just genuine excitement about trading in the South Seas? Not even close. When the dust settled and people started digging through the wreckage, they found that the entire scheme was built on a foundation of mind-boggling corruption that went all the way to the very top of the British government. So let's break down how they pulled this off, because this is where it gets really dirty. The company wasn't just selling shares, it was basically giving them away to powerful people to get what it wanted. Members of parliament bribed with stock so they'd vote the right way. High-ranking government officials, they got shares with no money down so they could cash in on a stock price they were helping to pump up. It was the textbook definition of insider trading and influence peddling, all happening on a massive national scale. And this quote from the poet Alexander Pope just perfectly captures how the public felt. People were furious, yeah, but it was more than that. They were disgusted. It felt like the entire system, politics, finance, all of it, had become rotten to the core. Like the whole country was just drowning in greed. With the public absolutely screaming for blood, Parliament had to do something. But, and this is the incredible twist, many of the politicians who were suddenly screaming the loudest about reform, they were the exact same guys who had secretly gotten rich off the bubble. So they rushed to pass new laws, filled with what one historian calls self-righteous indignation, partly to punish the guilty, but mostly, to save their own skin. And the law they came up with? It was a total disaster called the Bubble Act. And the irony here is just staggering. First off, the idea for the law actually came from the South Sea Company itself, before the crash, as a way to kill off its competition. Second, it was passed by that same corrupt parliament. And what did it do? It made it almost impossible for anyone to start a new company with multiple investors for over 100 years, right when the Industrial Revolution was supposed to be kicking off. So the main takeaway here is just incredible. In that panicked rush to look like they were fixing the problem, the politicians ended up putting the entire British economy in a legislative straitjacket. You could seriously argue that the response to the scandal did way more long-term damage than the scandal itself. And this brings us to the real heart of the matter. Because this pattern, a huge financial scandal fueled by corruption at the top, followed by a knee-jerk political backlash, this isn't just some dusty old story from the 1700s. It's a cycle, a trap that we see history fall into again and again. I mean, just look across the Atlantic. About a century later in the US, you've got the powerful Bank of the United States. And what's it doing? Pretty much the same thing as the South Sea Company, cozying up to powerful politicians, giving them loans and retainers. And the result? A huge political backlash led by President Andrew Jackson. He saw the bank as a corrupt threat to democracy, and he destroyed it. It's the same script, just with a different cast. And if you think this is all ancient history, think again. Let's bring it right into our time. Remember the early 2000s? The massive accounting scandals at Enron and WorldCom completely shattered public trust. And what was the political reaction? The Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It was a huge piece of legislation, passed really quickly in this atmosphere of moral outrage. Now, a lot of people say it was necessary, but a lot of others argue it was a classic overreaction that put a massive new burden on businesses, fitting that historical pattern just perfectly. Which really leaves us with this fundamental, tricky question. When a big scandal breaks, the public demands action, and our leaders are under enormous pressure to do something, anything. But as the South Sea bubble teaches us, that reaction, often born out of panic and political survival, can sometimes be way worse than the disease it's trying to cure. Figuring out how to solve the problem without creating a bigger one, well, that's a challenge that's just as real today as it was 300 years ago.